All right, hi. Strategic Railway Corridor Network, also known as Stracnet, and Defensive Counter Connector Lines. Distribution statement approved by public release, distributed unlimited. The Strategic Railway Corridor Network, Stracnet, and Defensive Connector Lines. Military Traffic Management Control, Military Traffic Management Command, Transportation Engineering Agency, Newport, Virginia 23606. List of illustrations, list of tables, executive summary, purpose of methodology, introduction of background for analysis, designation of defensive rail lines, maintenance of condition, operating speed, low traffic density, connector lines, clearance, weight capabilities, conclusions, appendix, state maps, and defensive Department of Defense installation activities requiring rail service. Also, Department of Defense installation activities requiring rail service by low-density branch line connectors. All right, the list of figures says the strategic railway corridor, Stracnet, civil railway lines most important in national defense. Figure 3 is the accidents due to the track defects. 4 is the plate girded bridges. 5 is clearance profile with the Department of Defense. 6 is a gauntlet track for high-level platform. And 7, an offset wheelchair access platform. The list of tables is 1, a measure of civil rail line defense readiness condition. 2, Department of Defense and installation activities requiring rail service. All right, the executive summary. The study was undertaken by the designation of the Strategic Railway Corridor Network, Stracnet, as an associated with the connector lines together with the Strategic Railway Corridor Network and defensive connectors in the civil rail lines and most important in the national defense. The study also refers to the defense readiness condition, the documents the defensive rail line requirements, the conclusion of the military traffic management commandment, man transportation and air energy, the conclusion of military traffic management command transportation engineering agency, Federal Railroad Administration, reviewed, updated, and designation of civil rail lines important to the national defense. The lines of these strategic railway corridor network meets the defensive readiness requirement for the material condition, clearance, and gross weight capability. State maps and Appendixes A are shown in the lines. These lines, Department of Defense installation activities requiring rail service to accomplish their assigned mission are listed in Appendix B. Inquiries of installation requirements and designation should be addressed to the Director of Military Traffic Management Control Command Transportation and Engineering Agency, or MTTE-SA. Attention. 720 Thimble Shoals Boulevard, Newport News, Virginia 23606 4537. Telephone number DSN 9274313. Commercial 757-878-4313. Fax 9274312. Commercial 757-599-1560. Also, inquiries about state railway maps on the rail database should be addressed to the Federal Railroad Administration, RRP 20, 1120 Vermont Ave, Northwest Stop, 715 Washington, D.C., 2590. Commercial telephone 202-493-6396. Commercial fax 202-493-6401. All right, 2. The purpose of methodology. The publication updates the designation of civil rail lines within the Strategic Railway Corridor Network, Stracnet, connectors with the lines of the Strategic Railway Corridor Network, and installation activities requiring rail service. 2. Footnote 2. This informs the civil rail lines designated with the satisfy the defense requirements, minimum defense readiness, and conditions. The Stracnet connector and lines of the civil railroad lines must important to the national defense. However, the Strategic Railway Corridor Network is not a routing guide, and actual shipment may not be travel over the Stracnet line. Rail lines are designated with the Strategic Railway Corridor Network, and connector lines may also be beneficial to the national defense if they could use the detour route and if a serviceable interpretation occurred on the Strategic Railway Corridor Network. The publication also presents the current with the Department of Defense installation activities requiring rail service to accomplish their assigned missions. Mythology. The Military Traffic Management Command Transportation Engineering Agency, or MTMCT, the Federal Railroad Administration, FRA, jointly reviewed were the lines of the Strategic Railway Corridor Network. The connectors are between the Strategic Railway Corridor Network and the defensive installation activities requiring rail service based on the Military Traffic Management Command Transportation Engineering Agency. Request DoD components, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Defense Logistics Agency updates the list of military installations and activity requiring the rail service of the Military Traffic Command Transportation Engineering Agency. Screened the final list of the Department of Defense. Track density. This is a good indicator with the rail line viability. The design defense lines otherwise were analyzed to determine if the alternate lines of the higher track density were available. When appropriate, the alternate line recommended by the FRA and the Management Traffic Command Engineering Agency consideration. The Military Traffic Management Command Transportation and Engineering Agency then designated the lines important to the national defense. The analysis also included that the review to ensure that the designated lines meet the defensive readiness and requirements of the maintenance conditions. Clearance with overshipments and weight-bearing capacity. The FRA continues monitoring carriers' safety, maintenance, inspection, compliance, so it generally achieves the coverage of most strategic railway corridor network. The defensive connector lines every 3 years are as well as part of overall inspection. The Department of Defense clearance profile used to analyze the rail line clearance were developed and presented with the Military Management Traffic Strategic Railway Corridor Network Condition Report dated in 1981. In the current update, the proposed alternator lines were evaluated with the capability accommodating the DoD clearance profile. Finally, the analysis evaluated the weight-bearing capacity of the defensive lines to support the military traffic as represented in the Department of Defense rail car loading configuration developed in 1983 report, and his gross weight are compared with the published gross weight and defensive lines coordinated with the carrier to associate the configuration acceptable all allowable gross weight limitations. Section 3. Introduction and background. During the 1970s, the railroad experienced a period of economic instability. 10 railroads declared bankruptcy. Deferred maintenance was commonplace. The Department of Defense experienced an excessive shipping times concerning increase over the civil railroad industry capability to support the defense of emergency. Therefore, in June 1975, the Department of the Secretary of Defense requested the commander of the Military Management Traffic Command establish the development of the Railroad of the National Defense. Program in coordination with the Department of Transportation, Federal Railroad Administration. The purpose of the Railroad National Defense Program is to identify the defensive railway equipment, identify the railroad defensive railway requirements, ensure consideration, national defense, civil railroad policy plans, standards, programs, and to gain support of the responsiveness of the defensive rail line requirements. The United States Transportation Command and the Department of Defense executive agent of the Railroad National Defense Program. Military Management Traffic Command initiated by the Railroad National Defense Program with the development of strategic railway corridor network in 1976. The strategic railway network is 30,000 miles interconnected network, 135 nodes, 180 links of rail corridors. Not actually rail lines important to the national defense. Figure 1. If it was developed in the analysis, mobilization, deployed, and needs to peace traffic time, combat tank shipments, and an indicator with oversized overweight movements. The FRA designated a mainline to satisfy the strategic railway network corridor. 1979, the list of the Department of Defense activities requiring railway service was published, and the list was updated in the Military Management Traffic Command reports and published in 1981, 83, 86, and 90 and 93. As the Department of Defense downsized, fewer installations require rail service. In some instances, strategic network command corridors are no longer required. A rail corridor, Bangor, Maine, was originally part of the Strategic Railway Corridor Network. It removed from the Strategic Railway Corridor Network, and following the closures of Loring Army Air Force Base in northern Maine. Military Management Traffic developed the Department of Defense clear profile to affect the rail line clearance needed for the oversized equipment. Military Management Traffic used the Department of Defense to analyze the railway line clearance and validate the clearance of the lines designated by the National Defense. I'm going to turn this to counterwise. Sorry, that was wrong. Gotta do it 2 more times. Shit. Alright, this is figure 1 of strategic railway corridor network. The strategic railway corridors and former main corridor are made in the docks, like dots. So you see the different strategic railway networks of the United States. By congressional mandate, the condition of the defensive line was reported in the Strategic Railway Corridor Network Condition Report in 1981. Connected line from the Strategic Railway Corridor Network to the defensive installation activities requiring rail service were identified. The maintenance condition with the defensive line was found in the satisfactory. All defensive shipments are not restricted to designated lines because of the clearance requirements. In most of the cases, can be moved to the alternate routes. The rail lines, in addition to the strategic railway corridor network, connector lines are beneficial to the national defense. In 1982, the Department of Transportation, FRA, and Military Management Command, Military Traffic Management Command agreed to review the rail lines important to national defense. These reviews resulted in the Military Management Traffic Condition publications, Railway Lines Important to the National Defense, 1983, Civil Rail Lines Important to the National Defense, 1986, 1990, and 1993. The report designated the Strategic Railway Corridor Network connector lines that the railway lines must be important to the national defense. Principal importance of the Strategic Railway Corridor Network lines relevate to the other lines in prior restoration services in an event of the emergency that the cause large-scale loss of the rail lines, the strategic railway network corridor, also the defense of the civil railway line, or civil railway planning to be more easily coordinated by highly density lines to satisfy the most of the strategic railway corridor network. The risk of the civil rail line is abundant affecting national defense is minimized. The Railway National Defense Program focus most on the effects of the strategic railway corridor network connectors lines from the abandoned and downgrade of the report is intended to be the routing guide with the traffic managers. Railway corridor will route the traffic using the different parameters related to the profit, distance, clearance, and time. In many instances, the defensive railway shipment will move over the rail lines not designated as part of the strategic railway corridor network. The capability of the rail carriers to perform their type of routing is an example of the built-in redundancy of the rail lines, which are a very robust network. During times of floods, hurricanes, earthquakes, the capability is very useful, but over time it can be very expensive. The railway industry must operate enough to make up the traffic efficiently, but not so much that the revenue generated inadequate support good maintenance. In past, too many of the miles of the track were chasing too few of revenue dollars. The situation resulted in several railroad bankruptcies. Many miles of deteriorated railway track deregulation of railroad industry of 1980 enabled the railroad to more easily abundant of profitable lines. The railway mergers sometimes result in most traffic on corridors being concentrated with a single line with the parallel lines either being abandoned, downgraded to serve the only local traffic. These reductions trackage permitted the railroad to focus the maintenance dollars where they needed the most, where with the result in most track is not well maintained. With improved efficiencies from the mergers and greater demand from the intermodal service, carriers have now been a dramatic increase of the traffic levels. In some instances, carriers have placed abandoned lines in the service and upgraded previous downgrade routes to respond with the increase of traffic. The rail industry understands the network improvement to help the transportation more cargo lines upgrade with a more worthwhile investment. The Railroad National Defense Program monitors the rail network abandonments affecting with the strategic railway corridor network, connectors and track improvements to the downgrade of the abandoned lines. These improvements provide the robust rail network that earns the capital required to provide good track maintenance and support national defense. For analysis, 1. Designation of the defensive rail lines. Traffic volume good indicated with the rail line viability. However, Higher traffic delineates all correlated well good condition maintenance conditions. And trafficable volume has been changed. The defensive railway corridors, civil lines, rail lines have been higher densities may exist that could replace previously designated for those corridors. Therefore, the Military Traffic Management Command and the Federal Railroad Administration conduct a review of analysis of the defensive corridors based upon the traffic densities. The FRA obtained at least available 1996 traffic density from the rail carriers. Those lines have significant decrease in traffic density, particularly those which are on analysis basis. Has dropped below 20 million gross tons since the last Department of Defense Federal Railroad Administration analysis in 1993. Reviewed by the FRA for the Federal Railroad Administration to determine if alternate routes were available for the high traffic density. The Military Management Traffic Control Transportation and Engineering Agency accepted the proposed changes in the network if the network integrity, clearance, and capability was also not compressed. Also, Military Management Traffic Control Transportation and Engineering Agency confirmed that each of the new line Department of Defense clearance profile requirements of the Military Management Traffic and Engineering Agency and the Federal Railroad Administration agreed upon the final designation of the Strategic Railway Corridor Network. Lines up to 32,421 miles, and the connectors of lines at 5,378 miles are shown in Figure 2, identified in detail with the state maps in Appendix A. Military installation activities requiring rail service are also listed in Appendix B. The state maps of the book of the FRA Railway Database. The FRA continuously updates the database with the rail line abundance carrier changes other data. The Military Management Traffic Transportation Engineering Agency and the use of the Transcad and ArcView to review the FRA's database to produce a map of each state. This shows the civil rail lines most important in the national defense, the space connector lines, and the Stracnet networks. Okay, 2. Maintenance condition, operating speed. Maintenance condition of the Strategic Railway Corridor Network is very important to the national defense. The allowable operation speed over a rail line is directly related to the maintenance condition of the line that is higher to the FRA track safety maintenance classification, then higher to the allowable operating speed. The defensive planners are using a average speed of 22 miles per hour to calculate the travel times of military equipment transported in the unit trains. Allowing expected delayed speeds of 40 miles an hour for most of the journey are desirable to assure the average speed of at least 22 miles per hour. The Table 1 shows a measure of civil rail line defensive readiness conditions. Lower speed are more acceptable to connector lines of the Strategic Railway Corridor Network because of the former lines are used only in a small portion of the total trip length. Also, many railroads maintain their main lines and operating the train higher speeds as the speeds shown in Table 1. Higher maintenance standards is increase in reliability and safety. The FRA monitors the carrier's inspection compliance so that each of the periodic coverage over the Strategic Railway Corridor Network. Connector rail lines review the FRA track inspection result indicating with the broad compliance with the measurement acceptable defense readiness conditions. Railroads have significantly increased capital expenditures for the National Railroad track and structure since the mid-1970s. Expenditures combined with the passage of Passage of the Staggers Act of 1980 resulted in track conditions improving significantly. The decrease in track-related accidents impressive is shown in the FRA data, Figure 3. Over 4,000 accidents were attributed to the track defects in 1979, 78, and 77, 78, and 79. They declined to about 1,000 accidents attributable to the track defects per year since 1989. The decline in related accidents is another indicator conforming defensive readiness conditions. We're on Figure 3. This shows the accidents on the left of line graph with the years from 77 to 97 going from 4,000 to a decrease of 1,000 a year accidents due to tracks. All right, Table 1 is a measure of civil rail line defensive readiness conditions. The Stracnet Federal Railroad Administration track class is 2 and is desirable at or less than 3. The freight train speeds a maximum of 25 to greater than less than 40 miles per hour. In the Stracnet and in the connector FRA track class 1 is not greater than 2 and desirable. Freight train speeds at 10 miles an hour, but not less than 25, desirable less than 25 miles per hour, or equal to. 3. The local traffic designated connector lines. The local traffic designated branch line connectors are those total civil and defense railway traffic is less than 3 million gross tons per year. The Services Defensive Logistic Agency has identified 171 installations active that require rail service to complete the assigned mission, Appendix B. Of the 171 installations activities requiring rail service, 53 of the Stracnet Strategical Railway Corridor Network main lines, 49 of the connectors of the traffic designated greater than equal to the 300 million gross tons per year, and 70 are low traffic density branch lines. One of the installations of the defensive, the FSP Air Force Pipeline Incorporated in North Carolina is one of the strategic railway corridor lines that is with less than 3 million gross tons per year, and other 69 are low traffic connectors in Table 2. The installation of the activities served by these low traffic density branches are identified in Service C and Service Appendix C. The FRA inspector designates the defensive rail lines, reveals the time of the FRA's inspection of the carrier, maintaining those lines in defensive readiness condition. Table 2 is the Department of Defense installation activities requiring rail service. Given the strategic railway network, the Army has 33 strategic 37 connectors equal to 3 million gross tons and 30 less than 30 million gross tons for a total of 100 rail installations and activities. Strategic net for the Navy is 3 connectors of traffic of 3 greater than total 3 million gross tons, 2 and 18 with less than 3 million gross tons at 23. The Marines have 6 strategic networks lines and 4 with less than 3 million gross tons. It gives them 10 for a total of 10 in the installation activities. Air Force has 4 strategic networks and 5 with equal to 1 million gross tons equivalently, and 4 and 8 less than 3 million gross tons for a total of 17. The DLA has 6, but does not include the strategical line within the greater than 3 million gross tons a year. They have 5 traffic volumes greater than 3 million gross tons per year and 10 with less than 3 million gross per tons per year, giving them a total of 21 installation activities for a total of 52 strategical networks, 49 connectors with 49 with 3 traffic volumes greater than equal to 3 million gross tons a year, and 70 3 million gross per tons a year, less than 3 million gross tons per year, for a total of 171 installations and activities. For the clearance, trackside obstructions, structural limitation, for example, bridges, tunnels, highway level stations, and platforms determine size, shipments, and that can be moved. The Strategic Railway Corridor Network report in 1991 explained the Military Traffic Management Command development of the Department of Defense clearing profile. Figure 5 to analysis rail lines clearance is determined the almost strategical railway corridor network lines past profile. In some cases, published clearances and information indicate that the strategic railway corridor and network lines meet the Department of Defense profile requirements. In other cases, commercial railroads indicate the Department of Defense profile would clear lines subject to special handling, even though the Department of Defense profile exceeds the publishing clearance for the route. Several commercial railroads have expanded clearance on their routes since 1981. This is a clearance profile of the defense. It shows note that the profile strikes the balance between the rail line clearance of the Department of Defense equipment requirements accommodations 96, the equipment of the type of the 99% quantity. Shows minimum on the bottom. Starting from the top, you have 13.8, 10.2, 8.1, and then to the right side, when the left side will start at the 14 and 8, 16 and 9, and 16 and 11. On the corner where the draw pulley would be, there would be a couple. We'll start at the bottom. 7/4 of an inch gauge. 7'4", 8/16", 9 foot, 9'4", 10'8", 12'2", and then the clearances between the bottom side of the plane of the top of the rails is 3/4, 1/5, 4, and 2 7/5. Because of the clearance restrictions designated by the Strategic Railway Corridor Network lines in Washington, D.C. and Newark area, supplemental clearance route has been designated with the central position of the East Coast Strategic Railway Corridor Network between Florida and New England. This designated route of the northern southern line between Roanoke, Virginia, and Newark, our area, Viva, Harrisburg, Allentown, Pennsylvania. These designations illustrated in the map's appendix. For the current update, the Military Management Traffic Commandment Transportation Engineering Agency evaluated the FRA's proposed line changes for the capability accommodating the Department of Defense profile. The analysts revealed that the most of the line proposed with the FRA could clear the Department of Defense profile, therefore was acceptable. In this case, the connector in the line of the Springfield, Massachusetts, New London, and New Naval Submarine Base, Groton, Connecticut, the requirements accommodated with extra large shipments between the dominant Department of Defense evaluation criteria and was designated with the route indicate and accommodate large Navy shipments and emphasis in the base. When increasing emphasis being placed on the mass transit passenger travel by the railing becoming the commonplace to support the work is being done by the Northeast Corridor to decrease the travel time, electrifying the rail lines between Boston and New Haven. The Railroad National Defense Program concerns with the project preserving existing clearance, ensuring continued access overseas defensive shipments to the Naval Submarine Base, Connecticut. The capability it was preserved from the Railroad National Defense Participation Environmental Impact Process for the Northern Eastern Corridor. Another concern of the could impact the Department of Defense required the rail clearance of the construction higher level platforms. A few stations had high level platforms for many years, and one of these platforms, Mansfield, Massachusetts, impedes the over width of the vehicle transportation at Camp Edwards. To solve this problem, the occasional shipment is made with the military vehicle blocked and braced rails above the rail car deck. The labor incentive of the time-consuming process, which works on occasional shipment, the procedures would cause the different difficulties for a lot of shipments at one time. High-level platforms are one method of providing wheelchair access to passenger trains. The number of stations with high-level platforms made dramatically in response to the American Disability Act of 1990, potentially impeding the clearance of many of the other routes. The construction of high-level platforms in concern with the railroad industry and the Railroad National Defense Program are checked with the clearance engineer participation in the Army Railway Engineering Maintenance Association, or REMA. Committee 28 clearance has not yet resulted in improving notification process for high-level platform construction or intended to participate in environmental impact processes when becoming aware of such construction, the same as we did in the Northeast Corridor electrification process. Fortunately, a well-designated station can have higher-level platforms, more capability, wide military loads on multiple track lines on only certain tracks that may be needed to be adjacent with the platforms. Freight trains with wide loads can pass through the station tracks that are not next to the high-level platforms. Another possibility of the construction of the gauntlet tracks by high-level platforms. The track near the platform is used as the passenger for the farther track of the freight trains over width of the loads. The American station, the New Carleton Figure 6, provides a good example of how the gauntlet tracks allow the freight passenger train to coexist on the high-level platforms. It is also possible to construct stations with a short high-level platform, offset the tracks, allow passage of military cargo and other wide loads. In these stations, most passengers use low-level platform steps in the coaches and on-board trains. A bridge plate extending with the door of the coach of the offset high-level platform to allow wheelchair access to the train when necessary. Shows the freight railway trains and the passenger rails and the platform, the gauntlet tracks for the high-level platform. Military Traffic Management and Command of the Transportation Engineering Agency reviewed the clearance of the Strategic Railway Corridor Network defines the lines between because of the clearance dimension consistently changing. An example: rebalancing, construction, and removing structures along the tracks can change clearance and capabilities. Only primary points on contact regard rail lines clearance of the railway clearance for A engineers. REMA and the Railway Industry Clearance Action, Industrial Clearance Assurance. Or Association, sorry. We work closely with them to ensure that defense lines can accommodate the Department of Defense profile. Here shows the figure 7, the offset wheelchair access platform. 5. Weight capabilities. Gross weight limitations of the railroad track structures are highly related to the high weight. Locomotives can weigh excess of 350,000 pounds. Military Management Traffic Engineering Agency analyzed the weight capabilities of defense rail lines and found no deficiencies. The industry standard of the gross weight of 263,000 pounds for four-way axles and 394.5 pounds for 6 axles. Special gross weight limitations of rail lines identified with the previously mentioned publication of rail line clearances. The loads exceeded with the published weights of the permitted with the railroads under special agreements. The maximum allowable load is usually significantly higher than published, and providing with the carriers a substantial safety factor. The trending is toward an even higher, even heavier weight capabilities. Many railroad main lines have been upgraded to handle 286,000 pounds. Upon 4-axle cars. On analysis developed and represented the Department of Defense gross weight configuration compared and published in the gross weight limitation strategical network lines. The first step established for the typical heaviest shipment of the comparison, the most common heavy defense shipment of the battle tanks. The gross weight of the 2 M1 tanks on a 6-axle Department of Defense 414-ton flat car can approach 365,000 pounds. With the M1 weight configuration was used for our analysis. We identified and published weight limitations of defensive lines. The result revealed the published limitations for the entire 320,000 mile strategical railway corridor network system equaled and exceeded 394,500 for a 6-axle. Almost 5,400 miles of connector lines have been published. Limitations are in excess of 394.5 pounds for 6-axle cars. Therefore, since 394,500 pounds, a limitation of the M1 weight configuration strategic railway network, most of the connector lines accommodated the defensive shipment. A case-by-case review was preferred to ensure the connector lines with the published limitations less than 263,000 pounds were adequate. The review revealed that the reduced publishing limitations for the connectors exceeded the M1 weight limitations. For installation, they could expect the tank shipment. The remaining of the connectors were published, and limitations were also found to accept the accepted defensive loads. The gross weight study of the defensive rail lines reviewed the acceptable allowable gross weight limitations. As in case oversized loads, overweight loads can be often routed by the non-strategical railway corridor network lines. Since most of the railway mail lines accommodate the 6-axle weighing 394,500 pounds. And 5, conclusion. Military Management Traffic Engineering Agency and the Federal Railroad Administration reviewed civil railway lines important to the national defense. The state maps and Appendix A identify the strategic railway corridor network and connector lines. The maps are a supplemented list of the Department of Defense activities requiring railway service. Appendix B. Most designated lines meet the defensive railway requirements of the maintenance, condition, clearance, and gross weight capabilities. The defensive railway lines designated with the Appendix A and the installation activities identified in the railway services in Appendix B documented defensive requirements and superseded previous reports. Military Management Traffic Control will periodically review the track inspection provided with the FRA defense lines and anticipated future detailed review of the defensive railway requirements of periodically conducted military traffic management command, transportation, engineering, and FRA. Appendix A shows the state maps. For instance, Alabama on the Florida Georgia on the Alabama on the Florida line. From Canada to Alaska, Nevada to Utah, to Arizona to Colorado to New Mexico and Mexico, Missouri, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, Oregon, Nevada, California, Nevada, Mexico, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, Arizona, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, and Delaware, Florida and Massachusetts, North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, and Florida, Canada, Montana, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Nevada, and Utah, Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, and Kentucky, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri, South Dakota, Nebraska, Missouri, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Colorado, West Virginia, Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, North Carolina, Georgia, Indiana, Illinois, Arizona, Missouri, Massachusetts, and Mississippi and Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas, Canada, Maine, New Hampshire, Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, Virginia, West Virginia, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, Michigan, Canada, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Canada, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wisconsin, Missouri, Iowa, Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, Illinois, Missouri, Arkansas, Iowa, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Canada, Wyoming, Idaho, Northwest, Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Colorado, Wisconsin, Oregon, Idaho, Nevada, Utah, and California. Canada, Vermont, Maine, New York, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware, Oklahoma, Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, Mexico, Arizona, New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Canada, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, Minnesota, Canada, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Montana, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio, Kentucky, Missouri, and Indiana, Missouri, Arkansas, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Minnesota, Colorado, Idaho, Oregon, Washington, California, New York, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Maryland, Ohio, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, and Nebraska, Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia, North Carolina, Indiana, Missouri, Arkansas, and Mississippi. Missouri, Arkansas, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Minnesota, Colorado, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas, New Mexico, Mexico, Idaho, Wyoming, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, Canada, Vermont, Maine, New York, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, West Virginia, North Carolina, Kentucky, Idaho, Georgia, Washington, Canada, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, Ohio, Kentucky, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, South Dakota, North Nebraska, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Utah, and Colorado. Appendix D. B. Appendix B supports Appendix A, identifying the railheads using each installation for services as well as the defensive logistics agency operating in installation activities where rail services imports the mission accomplished with either the peacetime mobilization, both the services of the Department of Logistics Agency identified 171 installation activities where rail service is important. These installations and activities are listed in the following table by the state. The list includes the installation of transition and base realignment closure. In some cases, the rail service is important to the rail alignment closure process. A key installation abbreviation should end this appendix, and the question of the installation status may be referred to the Military Traffic Management Command and Transportation Engineering Agency. Some installations where the rail services require the actual services of the off-post railheads are then traffic installation themselves. These installations identified with the symbol OP. The OP are for off-post railhead. However, the mower installation where railway service is important, service tracks, or installation proper. Alright, for the Alabama, you have Anson, AD, the Fort McLean, Fort Ruckler, Port Mobile, Alaska, Defensive Manker, Ellison, Elmendorf, Fort Richardson, Fort Wainwright, Arizona Camp Navajo, Davis Mountain Air Force Base, DCM, Hugs, Tungsten, Fort Huachuca, Yuma Proving Grounds, Arkansas, Fort Chaffee, Pine Bluff, Arsenal, Carver, and then it keeps going and going. I'm going to do Florida real quick because that's where I'm at. Blount Island, Camp Blanding, and Naval Ordnance Test Unit. Also, I think Pennsylvania is pretty important, so I'll go over the Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania Defensive Management Control Command, Pittsburgh, United Defense, Defensive Contracting Management Control, Pittsburgh, Westinghouse, Fort Indiana Gap, Letterkenny, AD, Navy, ICP, Mechanicsburg, Scranton, AAP, and Tobiana Army Depot. And there's a list of them, and I don't feel like giving out my United States that much. And then abbreviations for the stuff, for abbreviations for key. Appendix C, the Department of Defense installation of activities requiring rail service before low density branch lines. This also gives you the armies, armies, and the total of the armies, Stracnets, and their Air Force, Marine, Defense, and abbreviations, and that is the. Once again, we are the Strategic Railway Corridor Network Defensive Connector Lines, December 1998.